I'm 66 years old, a widower, a quiet man who keeps his house clean and his heart steady. I never imagined that age alone would make people think I'd forgotten who I am. But lately, the way my daughter's husband, Evan, talks to me, you'd think I was one long sigh away from losing my name. He stopped asking if I needed help and started insisting. Insisting I move in. Insisting my house was too big. Insisting my finances needed supervision. I tried to brush it off as concern, but a knot formed in my chest that I couldn't shake. Something wasn't right. It wasn't until he slipped up, just once, that I finally listened to my instincts. "Think of the pension, Claire," he whispered to my daughter when he thought I was out of earshot. "It could stabilize us." And in that moment, the room tilted. Not because I was weak, but because I saw the truth plain as day. This wasn't about family. This was about control. And I knew, right then, that things were going to get worse before they got better. I've lived in this lakeside cottage for almost 20 years now, and the walls have learned the rhythm of my days. Mornings start with the slow groan of the kettle, afternoons drift by with the soft creak of the porch swing, and evenings settle into a hush broken only by the sound of water brushing the rocks out back. People say the older you get, the smaller your world becomes, but I never felt that way. My world just got quieter, steadier. After my wife passed, I didn't fill the silence with noise. I let it become part of me. That's why, the first time Evan showed up unannounced, the air shifted in a way I didn't like. It was a Thursday afternoon, bright enough for the lake to shine silver, but cool enough that a breeze threaded through the screen door. I was sitting with a book I'd already read 3 times when I heard footsteps on the porch. Heavy ones. The kind that don't hesitate. Before I could stand, the door swung open and Evan walked in like he owned the place. "Hey," he said, waving a hand without looking at me. "Just checking in. Thought you'd need something." I said, "I didn't call you," but he was already walking through the living room, eyes scanning the corners like he was assessing damage after a storm. He didn't sit down. Didn't take off his jacket. Just moved from room to room, running his hand along shelves, glancing at the floorboards, staring too long at the staircase like it offended him. "You know," he began, tapping the banister with 2 fingers, "stairs can be dangerous at your age. One slip and—" He made a sharp snapping sound with his tongue. I kept my voice even. "I've walked those stairs every day for 20 years. He hummed, not agreeing, not disagreeing, just making a sound that said he didn't believe me. Something about that sound tightened a little knot under my ribs. He wandered into the kitchen, opening cabinets, checking dates on cans, inspecting the refrigerator door like he was afraid food would jump out and attack me. It felt less like a visit and more like an inspection, and I found myself standing straighter, shoulders squared, like a man being judged. "You really shouldn't be living alone out here," he said. "It's isolated. The driveway's steep. And what if something happens in the middle of the night?" I almost laughed. "What do you think happens here at night? The raccoons file a complaint." His smile didn't reach his eyes. He left after 20 minutes, claiming he had another errand in the area, though the nearest store is 7 miles away, and he never came back with a bag. When the door finally closed, the house exhaled around me. The walls softened. The quiet returned, and with it, my breath. But that was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Evan started appearing like clockwork. Sometimes at noon, sometimes at dusk. He always arrived without calling, always stepped inside before I answered the door, and always had some comment about the house. "That rug could catch your foot. That back step is too narrow. Your driveway really needs leveling. You could twist an ankle." He said these things with a strange cheerfulness, like he was performing concern rather than feeling it. My daughter, Claire, stopped by less often, but when she did, she echoed Evan's words almost word for word. "Dad, I worry about you out here. You need to think about options." Options. That word settled in my stomach like a stone. One afternoon, I came home from the bait shop with a bag of hooks and a small container of minnows. I stepped inside and immediately felt something was wrong. The air wasn't how I left it. There was a disturbance, a faint scent of Evan's cologne lingering like a fingerprint. When I reached the kitchen, he was standing there, holding my stack of mail. "Oh," he said, startled for the first time since all this began, "I was just organizing this for you. Looked like a lot." He flipped the envelopes too quickly, his thumb pressing hard on the corner of one. I could tell he wasn't reading my electricity bill. His eyes weren't on the addresses. They were looking for something specific. "That's my mail," I said softly. He froze for a split second before forcing a grin. "Just trying to help. You always taught Claire to stay ahead of things." "I'm doing that." But his hands were too confident, too familiar. And for the briefest moment, I saw him slide one envelope behind another, like he didn't want me to see it. My heart dipped, just slightly, in that warning kind of way. The kind that says, "Pay attention." When he left, I went through the stack slowly. Everything looked normal at first. A bank statement, a few grocery coupons, a notice about the fishing dock fee renewal. But then I noticed finger-shaped indentations on the flap of the pension account envelope, like someone had pressed too hard trying to open it carefully. A small, cold breeze ran down my spine. The next morning, I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway long before anyone knocked. Evan again. Third time that week. I didn't move to greet him. I let him come find me. He walked in with a smile too wide for the early hour. "Morning. Thought I'd swing by, check on you. You been eating okay? Drinking enough water? Why are you really here?" I asked. "Just care," he said, brushing past me like my question didn't matter. He moved toward the table where yesterday's mail still sat, and lightly tapped the envelopes. "These things can pile up if you're not careful." I kept my voice level. "I can handle my own mail." Sure, he said. "Just want to help before something slips through the cracks." He walked around the room with cool, assessing eyes, like he was imagining furniture placement in a home he didn't own. Then he moved to the desk in the corner, the one where I kept important papers. He hovered there a little too long, fingers twitching near the drawer. "I should go," he said suddenly, then paused. "Would you mind if I took a picture of your driveway? I want to show Claire how steep it is." "Why would she need that?" "For the insurance conversation," he said quickly. Something about the phrasing made my stomach stir. Insurance conversation. Driveway photo. My age. His comments. I followed him to the front door, where he pulled out his phone. He angled it toward the driveway, but I saw the screen light up facing me instead. He wasn't photographing gravel. He was switching between screens with practiced ease. I tilted my head. "What are you doing?" "Oh, just opening the camera app." But I'd seen enough. I stepped closer, not aggressive, just steady. And in that moment, the screen caught a glint of sunlight, and I saw my pension account name reflected in the glass. Not the driveway. Not insurance. My pension. My pulse slowed. Not sped up, slowed. Like the world had shifted into a clear, still pool of water. "Let me see that," I said quietly. His face drained for half a second before he forced a casual laugh. "Oh, this. Nothing. Just checking something." He locked the phone and slid it into his pocket too fast. "There's no need to worry," he said. "Claire and I have everything handled." The way he said handled made my jaw tighten. Like I wasn't a father, a husband, a man with a whole life behind me, just a task he was managing. He gave a final smile, patting my shoulder with false affection, and stepped off the porch. As he walked away, I watched him angle his phone toward his hand, tapping fast, saving something, sending something. His shoulders hunched slightly like a man trying to hide a crime in plain sight. I stayed still until I couldn't hear his steps anymore. Then I went back into the house. I sat at the table where the sunlight fell in a thin, warm stripe across the wood. I placed both hands on the pension envelope, feeling the faint pressure marks on the flap. That knot beneath my ribs grew just a little tighter. Because now I knew. This wasn't concern. This wasn't family helping family. This was the beginning of something I hadn't yet named, but could already feel tightening around the edges of my life. And the next crack came quicker than I expected. That evening, while I was washing a mug in the sink, I glanced out the window and saw a figure standing near the mailbox. The porch light cast just enough glow to reveal the shape, tall, shoulders stiff, head down. Evan. He wasn't checking the mailbox. He was holding his phone up to my stack of mail still sitting inside it, snapping a photo. I watched silently, the mug still warm in my hand. For a moment, the world felt too quiet. Like everything inside the house held its breath. He took 2 more pictures. Then he turned and walked briskly back toward his car, not looking around, not hesitating. My heart didn't hammer. It didn't race. It just settled into a slow, steady burn, cold and deep. I wiped my hands on a towel and stepped quietly out onto the porch. I didn't call out. I didn't confront him. I just watched. As he reached the edge of the driveway, his phone buzzed. He lifted it instantly, the screen glowing bright across his face. I saw my name on the top of the document he was looking at. He froze. He turned. And there I was, standing still, my silhouette framed by the warm porch light, looking straight at him. His mouth opened, then closed. Then he stammered something like, "Just checking something, insurance, you know how it is." But I wasn't listening anymore. Because in that exact moment, with the wind coming off the lake and the earth beneath my feet steady as an old friend, I finally caught him, taking photos of my pension statements. And the quiet inside me shifted into something sharper. Something patient. Something ready. The night Evan stood by my mailbox taking photos, I barely slept. The lake usually settles me, its slow breath against the rocks, its dark surface holding the sky like an old memory, but that night it felt different. Too still. Too quiet. Like it knew something I didn't. I sat in my chair near the window, watching the moon ease across the water, and I kept replaying what I saw. Evan angling his phone, my name glowing on the screen, his face caught in that split second of panic when he realized I'd seen him. In the morning, I made coffee the way I always do, carefully measuring the grounds, listening for the soft drip against the glass. Routine has a way of anchoring a man. But the cup didn't taste right. Bitter, even for me. I set it down and stared out at the lake again, the light turning gold at the edges. A day that beautiful shouldn't carry dread in its shadow, but it did. Around 9, I heard a knock, sharp, confident, the kind that assumes it'll be answered. It was Evan. He stood on the porch, hands in his pockets like a man visiting a retirement home, not a father-in-law's cottage. His smile was tight, too close to a grimace. "Morning," he chirped like nothing had happened. I didn't move aside. "What were you doing at my mailbox last night?" He blinked once, then chuckled softly, the sound forced through a thin layer of superiority. "Oh, that. You must be misremembering. It was dark. Shadows can play tricks when you're tired." Misremembering. The word hit harder than I expected. Like he'd reached inside my ribcage and twisted something that had been stable for decades. "I know what I saw," I said. "Well," he replied, leaning against the doorframe, "we don't need to argue. I was checking the driveway slope again. That's all. You really shouldn't be bending to get the mail anyway. Let younger people handle paperwork, okay?" He said younger people like he was some benevolent guardian rather than a man circling my life like a hawk. "I handle my own mail," I said. Sure," he murmured. "But let's be honest, you get tired. We all do at your age." My chest grew warm, not anger, exactly, but something close. Something steady and old. He patted my arm, the gesture patronizing and rehearsed. "No shame in needing help. Just let us manage things." Meaning him. Claire still believed she was leading the charge, but every time she repeated his words, it sounded like reading from a script she didn't write. He stepped inside without asking and set his keys on my counter like he lived there. "Claire's coming by later," he said. "We want to talk about some long-term plans." "I don't need long-term plans," I said. That's what you think, he answered, in the tone one uses for a stubborn child. He looked around the room again, assessing it, calculating something I couldn't see yet. His gaze lingered on the staircase, the medicine bottle on the table, the stack of mail I'd refused to move. Then he smiled, too calmly. You'll feel relieved once everything is settled. Trust me. Trust him. The man sneaking through my mail, photographing my pension, lying without flinching. He left a few minutes later, humming as he walked to the car. One of those victory hums, low and satisfied, the kind a man uses when he thinks a door has just swung open for him. Claire came that afternoon, her voice soft but her eyes somewhere else. She hugged me, but she pulled away fast, as if hugging too long might cause cracks in a plan. "Dad, you look tired," she said immediately. "I'm not," I replied quietly. "You sound tired."
I pulled one of the larger boxes toward me, the one labeled papers, keep. The handwriting was my wife's, looping neatly across the cardboard in faded blue ink. Just touching it brought a warmth to my chest. She always saved more things than I did: notes, receipts, photos, letters. Memories, she used to say, are proof we lived. I lifted the lid and began sorting through the contents. Clumps of envelopes, clipped together tax returns, warranty papers long expired. I wasn't sure what I was searching for. Maybe distraction. Maybe clarity. Maybe something to remind me I was not, as Evan kept saying, misremembering. But then, near the bottom of the box, under an old insurance file, I found something I didn't recognize. A smaller envelope. Yellowed at the edges. The flap unsealed. My name written on the front. Not my wife's handwriting. Not Claire's. I frowned, sliding my thumb under the flap and opening it slowly. Inside was a single folded sheet, thin, brittle, official. When I opened it, my entire world shifted half an inch to the left. It was a police incident report. Name on top, Evan Carter. My hands went still. For a moment, the attic didn't feel like my attic at all. The dust in the air turned thick, the light dimmed, and all I could hear was the soft thud of my own heartbeat. I read slowly. The report described a complaint made at Evan's former workplace, the company he always claimed he left because of restructuring. Only the report said something very different. Financial misconduct. Unauthorized access to accounts. Suspicious transactions routed through his personal number. The words seemed to breathe off the page. Internal investigation launched. Subject resigned abruptly. Settlement reached. Settlement. Not cleared. Not exonerated. Settled privately. Quietly. My breath tightened. I didn't know who saved this, or why it ended up in my attic. But it meant someone, maybe even my own wife, years ago, had uncovered a truth I never imagined would matter. I leaned back, letting the attic wall support me. The wood felt cool against my shoulders. Downstairs, the cottage creaked lightly, shifting in the breeze, as if reacting to the discovery too. Evan had a past. A serious one. And now he'd returned to the same pattern, moving close to someone's finances, presenting it as concern, then trying to take control. Only this time, the someone was me. I held the report a little tighter. My hands didn't shake. They felt steadier than they had in weeks. The quiet inside me wasn't fear anymore. It was understanding, slow, sharp, and cold. I stayed up there longer than I expected. Reading the report again. Studying details I had overlooked the first time. A date near the bottom caught my eye: 12 years ago. 12 years. That means Claire never knew. He met her later. Married her a few years after that. And he'd buried this part of himself so deep that no one ever thought to look. But my wife must have known something. The envelope wasn't marked, wasn't labeled, but she had tucked it into our keep box deliberately. She always said, some truths are meant for later. Maybe later had finally arrived. I folded the report, slipped it back into the envelope, and climbed down the ladder slowly. My knee protested on the last step, but I hardly felt it. The living room seemed brighter when I returned to it. The lake shimmered beyond the window, a silver sheet bending sunlight in soft waves. For a moment, the sight grounded me. Then something moved outside. A flicker, quick, near the edge of the porch. I stepped closer to the window. No one was there. But when I opened the front door, a draft of cold air swept in, and a folded piece of paper lay on the porch floor. Not an envelope. Not a letter. A document. I picked it up. The paper was crisp, new, almost too clean against the weathered wood of my porch. I unfolded it carefully. And there, staring up at me, was Evan's arrest intake form. My breath paused. Everything inside me went still. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something someone dropped. No one stumbled past my house holding a 12-year-old arrest record. Someone delivered it. Someone who knew. Someone who wanted me to know. The intake form listed his full name, fingerprint ID, the charge classification from the original incident, the booking number. Even his mugshot. Evan, younger, eyes hollowed with shame and annoyance mixed together like a man unhappy not with what he did, but with being caught. A wave of cold washed over me, not from the air but from the truth settling into my bones. This man, the man insisting I couldn't live alone, the man photographing my financial documents, the man telling neighbors I was slipping, had a history of the exact kind of behavior he was now trying to disguise as concern. And the person who slipped this form under my door, well, that was a mystery of its own. I stepped outside, looked both ways down the quiet road. The trees rustled softly. A car passed far in the distance. But no one was close, no footsteps, no voices, no shadows. Whoever delivered the form didn't want to be seen. Or couldn't be. But they wanted me prepared. I went back inside, closed the door, and locked it. Then I sat at the kitchen table with both documents laid out before me. The police report from my attic. The intake form from my porch. 2 pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know existed this morning. And suddenly, the pattern of Evan's behavior shifted into new clarity. His inspections. His comments about my age. His desire to manage everything. His questions around town. His obsession with my pension. He wasn't planning for my future. He was planning for his. I leaned back in my chair and let out a slow breath. The cottage hummed faintly, the refrigerator clicking on, the clock ticking in its steady rhythm. Ordinary sounds in an extraordinary moment. The truth was in front of me. And it wasn't a subtle one. Evan wasn't just controlling. He was dangerous. Not the dramatic kind, no yelling, no physical threat. The quiet kind. The kind that moves paperwork behind closed doors. The kind that whispers to neighbors to build a narrative. The kind that speaks in concern while positioning himself as the responsible one. The kind that destroys a life with a signature instead of a shout. I ran my thumb across the edge of the intake form. The paper was smooth, almost slick. Someone saved me by delivering this. Someone who knew his past. Someone who didn't want me to become another victim. But who? I thought of the custodian from the hospital. The doctor. My neighbors. Even Lila, the county clerk I hadn't seen in months but had known since childhood. Any one of them could have found the record. But only one question mattered right now. Why today? Why now, when Evan was tightening his grip? Why slip the form under my door at the exact moment the police report appeared in my attic? Either someone was watching closely, or someone knew Evan was moving faster than I realized. A quiet unease curled in my chest, not fear, not panic, but the sensation of a clock starting somewhere I couldn't see. Time was shifting. The ground was shifting. And I needed to be ready.
The lake glimmered outside the window. The wind picked up, brushing through the tall pine by the porch. And for the first time in days, I felt something I hadn't felt since all this began. A hint of control. Not victory. Not triumph. Just awareness. A beginning. I collected both documents, slid them into a plain folder, and tucked it beneath the drawer of my side table. My wife taught me that trick. There's always a space under a drawer where things can be hidden. People never think to look there. Then I sat back in my chair, the afternoon light warming my hands, and let the quiet fill the room again. But before the peace settled fully, before my breath found its usual rhythm, I heard something. A soft sound. Barely a whisper. A piece of paper slipping under my front door. Again. I froze. The quiet in the cottage thickened into something electric. Very slowly, I rose from my chair and walked toward the door. My steps were measured, steady, silent. A man approaching not danger, but truth. On the floor, another document lay face down. The edges crisp. With a calm breath, I picked it up and turned it over. My blood went cold. It wasn't a police report this time. It wasn't an intake form. It was a note. 6 words written in neat, blocky handwriting. You need to act before he does. My heart tightened, not with fear, but with understanding. Someone wasn't just warning me. Someone was urging me. Someone knew Evan's pattern. Someone knew time was running out. I folded the note slowly, pressing the crease with my thumb. The cottage felt smaller, darker, sharper around the edges. Evan's past had resurfaced. And now, his present was closing in. I didn't sleep much the night I found the note under my door, the one telling me to act before Evan did. I kept it folded in my hand until dawn, the paper warming slowly beneath my thumb. I wasn't shaking, not in fear, but in realization. There are moments when the truth shifts from a shadow to a shape you can finally name. That night, the shape became clear. By the time the sun edged over the lake, turning the surface pale gold, I had decided one thing. I would not confront Evan. Confrontation is noise. And noise only helps men like him rewrite the story. I needed quiet. Quiet is where truth grows. So I sat on the porch with my morning coffee, black, the way my wife drank it, and watched the lake breathe. My cane rested beside me. My thoughts were steady as the slow rise and fall of water. I thought about the intake form, the police report, the note, the neighbor's whispers, Claire repeating Evan's words like they were script lines. Evan was tightening a net around me. But he didn't realize I'd slipped through the holes and was already circling behind him. I made the call after breakfast, dialing slowly, the familiar number warm with old memories. It rang twice before she answered. County records, this is Helen speaking. Her voice hadn't changed. Strong, clear, a little scratchy at the edges like someone who'd smoked half her life but laughed her way through the other half. Helen and I served together in a volunteer veterans counseling group years back. She was the kind of woman who remembered everything, even things people wished she'd forget. Helen, I said, it's me. There was a pause, surprised, warm. Well, I'll be damned. You all right? I've had better weeks. That's so. Her tone sharpened instantly. Helen never was one to waste softness when strength was needed. What's going on? I hesitated. Not because I doubted her, but because saying the words made them real. I need you to look someone up for me, I said quietly. Someone named Evan Carter. Another pause. Longer this time. Your son-in-law? That's the one. Her voice dropped lower. Why? Because I found some things, I said. And someone slipped more under my door last night. But I need to know what's true. Really true. A chair scraped on her end. Hold on. Give me a sec. I could hear her typing. Fast, precise, the way she used to sort through stacks of old service records when we volunteered together. Papers shuffling. A muffled curse under her breath. Well, she said finally, this is gonna take a minute. Some files are sealed. I closed my eyes. Can you see anything from your side? I can see the seals, she said. And I know what those seals usually mean. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't have to. She continued softly. Financial misconduct charges. Internal audits. Investigations marked unresolved due to resignation. Not great. How recent? I asked. Old enough he probably thinks the world forgot, she said. Young enough he should have disclosed it to your daughter. My jaw tightened, but I said nothing. Let me check deeper, she murmured. The line grew quiet except for her fingers moving across the keys. A minute passed. Then 2. I watched a small bird land on the edge of my porch, hop twice, then fly away. The lake glimmered behind it. Finally, Helen exhaled. Found it. What? A sealed fraud claim, she said. Filed by his employer, then mysteriously withdrawn. Settlement reached. I thought of the intake form, the police report, the damaged corners of my pension envelope. The pieces were falling together too quickly now. Helen kept going. That's not all. There's a pattern. Job changes every couple of years. Always something to do with finances. Always leaving before things blow up. My fingers tightened around the phone. Why are the files sealed? I asked. Because sealed files usually involve agreements, she said. He paid someone. Someone paid him. Either way, he slipped out the back door. I breathed in slowly. The wind rustled the pine tree beside the porch, scattering light across the boards. And now, I said, he's trying to do the same thing here. Helen didn't respond right away. Then she said softly, "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the photos he took of my pension statements, the questions he asked around town, the way he spoke to me like I was slipping, the way Claire repeated his words as though she couldn't hear herself, the documents left on my porch, the note warning me. When I finished, Helen didn't speak for several seconds. Then she said, "You need to start documenting everything." "I already did," I replied. "Last night." "Good," she said. "Keep going. Dates, times, comments. Every visit. Every attempt to access your information. Screenshot anything you can." Her tone softened just a little. "Men like him count on silence. You're not giving him that." I nodded even though she couldn't see it. "What else can you find?" She typed again. "His name is tied to something else. Not exactly a charge, not exactly a file, more like a note from a judge. Says he should not be placed in financial oversight roles due to, hold on, due to demonstrated breaches of fiduciary trust." I closed my eyes again. The phrase cracked something open inside me. Breaches of trust. The kind of words that sit heavy, the kind that echo long after you hear them. "He's doing it again," I whispered. "You bet your life he is," Helen said. "And this time, he's using family as a shield." I swallowed. The lake shifted, waves rolling gently against the rocks. "Can you see if he filed anything recently?" I asked. Helen typed again, slower this time. Then she stopped. "Oh no," she whispered. My chest tightened. "What?" "I found something new. Filed 2 days ago." "Tell me." She hesitated, then spoke carefully. "He submitted an intent to manage form." My breath stilled. "What kind of form?" "A legal notice," she said softly, "giving him provisional authority to step in as your temporary decision-maker if you show signs of mental decline." Silence. The kind that doesn't settle, it drops. The kind that makes the house pulse around you. I felt the warmth drain from my hands. Not panic. Not shock. Something colder. Something sharper. "He's trying to build a case," I said quietly. "Yes." "He's telling people I'm confused." "Yes." "He's taking pictures of my mail." "Yes." "And now he's filing paperwork to take over my decisions." Helen didn't answer. She didn't have to. I gripped the phone a little tighter. "Can he do it?" "Not alone," she said. "Not yet. Not without proof. But he's laying groundwork. And if Claire echoes him, if she plays along." Her sentence trailed off. But I finished it in my head. "He could take everything. My home. my pension, my independence, my life. The lake outside shimmered in and out of focus. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if the truth had weight and had finally settled across my shoulders. He filed under the category of anticipated decline, she added. He's claiming he's stepping in preventively. Preventively. Like I was a sinking ship and he was the only one willing to patch the holes. And the worst part, she added, if he collects enough statements, from neighbors, from doctors, from town officials, he can trigger a review. A review. Of me. Of my competency. Of my right to make decisions. I inhaled slowly through my nose. The breath felt older than my bones. Helen's voice softened. I'm sorry. I know this is a lot. It's not too much, I said. It's just truth. She paused. What are you going to do? I looked out at the lake, remembering something my wife once told me. Quiet is not weakness. Quiet is where strength gathers. I'm going to get ahead of him, I said. Before he finishes the story he's writing. Helen exhaled softly. Then listen carefully. First thing you need to. But before she could finish, I heard something outside. A car door. Not Claire's. Not Evan's. Someone else. Helen heard my silence. You still there? Yes, I whispered. Footsteps approached my porch, slow, cautious, stopping just short of the steps. I stood up quietly, walked to the window, moved the curtain half an inch. A figure stood there. Not Evan. Not Claire. Someone I recognized from around town, but barely. A man who delivered packages sometimes. Or filled in at the hardware store. Someone who floated through small towns like a leaf riding wind. He held something in his hands. A folder. Thicker than a letter. Thicker than the intake form. He placed it on my porch without knocking. Then walked away. I watched him drive off until his car disappeared around the bend. Helen's voice came through the phone again. What's happening? I stared at the folder like it was glowing. I think, I said quietly, someone else wants me to know the truth. What truth? I stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking beneath my feet, and picked up the folder. It was heavier than I expected. I opened the cover. And what I saw inside made my stomach drop, slowly, like a stone falling through water. Helen, I whispered. He filed more than one form. She inhaled sharply. What do you mean? I swallowed hard. He filed a petition declaring me at risk. And he listed reasons. Detailed ones. Helen cursed under her breath. What reasons? I read the first line aloud. Subject shows signs of cognitive decline, confusion about days, repeating questions, inability to manage financial responsibilities. None of it was true. But he had already started writing the story. And now he was trying to make the world believe it. The pages trembled in my hand, not from fear, but from something older, deeper, colder. He's building a case, I said. Yes, Helen whispered. And he's almost finished. I closed the folder slowly, letting the weight of it settle into my palm. Then, quietly, steadily, I said the words that changed everything. Not if I finish mine first. I didn't open the folder from the porch right away. I let it sit on the kitchen table for a while, the way you let a storm cloud gather before you decide whether to stay inside or ride through it. Every now and then, a soft breeze from the lake drifted through the open window and lifted the corner of the folder, as if urging me forward. But I waited. My heart needed a steady place to land first. When I finally sat down and opened it, the truth was waiting, ugly, undeniable, arranged neatly in printed lines that made my stomach drop in slow motion. Not just the forms Evan filed. Not just the assessment claims he was building. But pages of something else. Debt. Debt in numbers so heavy the paper almost felt weighted in my hands. There it was, row after row. Delinquent loan. Personal credit failure. A declined refinancing request. A wage garnishment recommendation. A high-risk financial behavior flag. Lines highlighted by someone at the county office. Someone who wanted me to see every piece. I leaned back slowly, feeling the chair creak under my weight. My eyes traced the numbers again and again until they blurred. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't confused. I wasn't tired or misremembering, as Evan liked to claim. He wasn't trying to take care of me. He wasn't trying to protect Claire. He wasn't trying to help with my future. He was drowning. Drowning in debts he created. Drowning in decisions he didn't want to face. Drowning in the same pattern that followed him from job to job, town to town. I was his life raft. My pension. My home. My independence. The pieces I'd worked for all my life were nothing more than flotation devices to a man desperate enough to grab hold of anything, even if it meant pulling the person beside him underwater. For a moment, something inside me softened. Not pity, not forgiveness, just a small ache for the boy he might have been before greed carved its way into him. But that ache faded as quickly as it came. Because the man he was now was dangerous. I took the folder and walked out onto the porch. The lake shimmered, soft ripples moving across the water. Birds shifted on the branches above, shaking loose a few leaves that drifted down like quiet messengers. The world looked peaceful enough, but inside me, something steadier was forming. A plan. Or maybe it was more than that. A spine. A center. A truth unclouded by fear. I'd spent weeks feeling like I was slipping on a wet floor, trying to keep my balance while Evan carefully tilted the world under my feet. But now the tilt made sense. Now I could see every angle he was working. And strangely, the clarity brought peace. I wasn't losing my mind. Someone else was losing control. I sat in the porch chair, the one with the frayed armrest where my wife used to rest her elbow while watching the morning sun. I ran my hand along the worn fabric, grounding myself in the memory of her steadiness. She had a way of seeing through people. A way of warning me softly, subtly, with a look or a quiet comment. If she were here now, she'd say, "Don't match his noise. Outthink him." So that's what I did. I spent the rest of the afternoon documenting everything. Every visit. Every word. Every attempt he made to touch my mail. Every moment he spoke down to me. I took photos of the pension envelopes. I wrote down the dates he appeared unannounced. I recorded the times neighbors told me he'd asked questions that weren't his to ask. The pages filled slowly, like bricks in a wall I was building between him and my life. Later that evening, as the sky turned lavender and the lake became a sheet of dark glass, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was another warning. Another clue. Another piece to slide into the puzzle. But it wasn't. It was far worse. Your evaluation hearing is scheduled for Monday. Evan's request was approved for review. County office. My fingers tightened around the phone. The message glowed white against the deepening dusk. Monday. 4 days from now. A hearing. A review. They were going to evaluate me. My competency. My ability to make my own decisions. All based on Evan's carefully crafted narrative, his filed forms, his neighbor comments, his subtle performance of concern. A chill moved through me, but not the kind that comes from fear. It was the chill of understanding how far he was willing to go. He had pushed the first domino, and now the county office was letting it fall. I stood and walked slowly toward the edge of the porch. The air smelled like cooling pine and lake water. My cane pressed lightly into the boards, a steady rhythm under my hand. Across the street, Mrs. Hendricks stepped out onto her porch, wrapped in her usual blue shawl. She waved at me. I waved back. And I wondered how many of the people in this small town Evan had already spoken to. How many seeds of doubt he'd planted. How many whispers he'd turned into concerns. But the thing about whispers, they die quickly when truth speaks louder. And for the first time, the truth wasn't blurry anymore. Evan didn't want to help me. He wanted a legal doorway, a shortcut to my assets. the intent to manage form, the at-risk filing, the whispers, the pictures of my pension, the mail he tried to intercept. They weren't random. They were steps. Steps in a plan that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the hole he'd dug himself into. I returned to the chair, picked up the folder, held it against my chest for a moment, letting the weight settle. Then I said it out loud, to the lake, to the air, to myself. He needs me to be incompetent. The words rang quiet and solid in the fading light. He needs me to decline. He needs me to disappear. Saying it didn't shake me. It centered me. Because now I understood the stakes. Now I could see his desperation. Now I could see exactly what I was up against. It's one thing to fight a greedy man. It's another to fight a desperate one. But it's something entirely different to fight a desperate man who thinks you're too old to fight back. As the sky darkened, I stepped inside the cottage. The lamps cast warm amber light across the room, softening the edges of the shadows. I placed the folder on the table, smoothed the papers inside, and prepared myself for what came next. Evaluation hearing. They'd sit me down in some room in the county building and ask if I could remember dates, handle bills, understand my own affairs. They'd examine me like an aging piece of machinery. Evan would be there, face full of concern, hands folded, voice trembling with practiced compassion. I just want what's best for him, he'd say. But behind that mask, a man praying the system would hand him the keys to my life. The irony almost made me smile. Because if there's one thing Evan never understood, never could understand, it's that quiet doesn't mean weak. Silence doesn't mean surrender. Stillness doesn't mean slow. Some storms move without sound. Some defenses build without walls. And some of us spent a lifetime learning to endure quietly, observe quietly, survive quietly. He was about to find out what that meant. I picked up my notebook again, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote 5 simple words at the top. Prepare for Monday. Not alone. Because Evan wasn't the only one with connections. He wasn't the only one who knew people at the county. He wasn't the only one with people willing to step forward. He wasn't even the only one with sealed documents. I had Helen. I had the porch visitor, whoever he was. I had neighbors who still remembered the man I've been for decades. And I had myself. The truth was on my side. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to hope forming quietly inside me. Not loud, not triumphant, just steady. A tide rising. A man returning to himself. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from Helen. I found more. Call me first thing. No explanation. No details. Just a warning in 7 words. I exhaled, long and slow, letting the breath steady my heart. Whatever she found, whatever she was about to tell me, I had a feeling it was going to change everything. And as I closed the notebook and turned off the lamp, the cottage felt different, charged, alive, ready. The next storm hadn't hit yet, but the wind was already shifting. The morning of the hearing came with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in a long time. Not the quiet that creeps in when something's wrong, but the quiet that settles when a person finally decides they're done being pushed. I woke before the sun, the lake outside still a sheet of dark glass, the air cool enough to nip at my skin. I stood there for a while at the window, watching the world shift from deep blue to pale gold, and I felt the steadiness return to my chest like an old friend. I'd packed my folder the night before. Every document tucked neatly inside, the sealed police report from my attic, the arrest intake form that silently appeared on my porch, the debt records Helen found, the screenshots of Evan's visits, and the notes I kept documenting every word he'd said to me. There was nothing explosive in that folder, no dramatic confession, no shocking revelation, just truth. Quiet, consistent truth. The kind that stands firm even when someone tries to twist it. I dressed slowly, choosing clothes that felt familiar to me, a soft gray sweater, clean slacks, my good shoes polished just enough to show I still cared about how I walked into a room. I didn't dress up for the board. I dressed up for myself. Dignity is a long habit, and it's something Evan never understood. Maybe he never had the chance. When I stepped outside, the air tasted like autumn. Crisp and steady. The pine needles crunched under my feet, and as I locked the door, I let my hand rest on the doorknob for an extra second. Not out of fear, just acknowledgement. This was my home, my life, my history, and I was walking out this morning to protect it. Helen picked me up in her dusty blue sedan. She had 2 coffees in the cup holders, one for her, one for me. No sugar, just a little cream. She remembered, even after all these years. "You ready?" she asked as I settled into the seat. I nodded. Ready enough. She looked at me the way someone looks at an old comrade, not with pity, not with concern, but with that quiet respect that comes from surviving life's heavier moments side by side. She reached into her bag and handed me another document, folded neatly. "You'll want this too," she said. Internal note from the county. Shows he tried to expedite the petition. I took it gently. He really thought he could pull this off. "He thinks you're old," she said plainly. "He confuses quiet with weak. A mistake a lot of people make." I exhaled through my nose. "He won't make it again." We drove the rest of the way in silence, the kind that doesn't weigh on you, just sits comfortably between 2 people who don't need to fill every gap with words. When the county building finally came into view, tan brick, square windows, the flag out front barely moving in the still air, I felt something shift in me. Not fear. Something firmer. Resolve. I walked with my cane at an even pace, the sound of the rubber tip tapping lightly against the tile floor inside the building. People moved around us, staff, residents, clerks, but I felt strangely separate from all of it. Like I'd stepped into a moment I already knew how to move through. We reached the hearing room. A long table. 3 board members. A recorder. And on the far side, Evan. He stood when I entered, his expression an imitation of relief. "There you are," he said, voice coated with practiced concern. "We were worried you'd be confused about where to go." Confused. He loved that word. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I simply walked to my seat, placed my folder on the table, and let the room take me in. The board introduced themselves. Asked if I needed water. Asked if I was comfortable. I smiled politely. "I'm fine." Then they turned to Evan. "Mr. Carter," the chairwoman said, "your submitted concern involves cognitive decline?" He nodded solemnly. "Yes. My father-in-law has been showing signs. Forgetfulness. Confusion. Trouble handling mail and finances. We're just here to ensure his safety." Safety. He said it like a prayer. The chairwoman turned to me. "Sir, would you like to respond before we begin the evaluation questions?" I reached for my folder calmly. "I would." Evan's eyes flickered. Not fear yet, but irritation. Like I was stepping outside the role he had written for me. I opened the folder. Spread the documents neatly on the table. "I've been documenting everything," I said. "And I'd like the board to review these before you make any decisions." The room shifted, subtle but real. The board leaned forward. Evan leaned back. I slid the first document forward, the sealed police report. "This is from his previous employer," I said quietly. "It details financial misconduct." Evan stiffened. I slid the arrest intake form next. "This is the original record from the case, delivered anonymously to my home." The board exchanged looks. Then the debt printouts. "Here are his delinquent accounts, loan defaults, failed investments, and garnishment notices." Evan's face drained of color. "And," I added, reaching for the last stack, "these are notes documenting every time he attempted to access my mail, photograph my pension, or question neighbors about my finances." A long silence followed. The board members picked up each page, reading with eyes that grew more focused, more cautious, more aware with every line. Evan spoke first, too quickly. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. He's confused. Someone must have fabricated these documents. Helen cleared her throat. Actually, I pulled some of them directly from county records. The board looked at her. "And who are you?" the chairwoman asked. "County employee," Helen said, holding up her badge. "And his representative today." The chairwoman nodded slowly. "Noted," Evan sputtered. "This is absurd. You're twisting things. He's the one. He can't even understand the—" "Mr. Carter," the second board member interrupted, "please sit." The tone wasn't gentle. Evan sat. For the first time since all this began, I saw something crack in him. Not anger, not arrogance, but fear. Real fear. The kind people feel when the ground they counted on suddenly shifts beneath them. The board conferred quietly for several minutes. Then the chairwoman lifted her head and looked directly at me. "Sir," she said, "based on the evidence presented, we are halting the competency review immediately." A breath I didn't realize I'd been holding eased from my chest. She turned her gaze to Evan next, steadier, harder. "And Mr. Carter, we are opening an internal inquiry into your conduct. The documents you filed raise serious concerns. You may not leave the building until an investigator speaks with you." His mouth fell open. "You can't. This is," Claire said. "Your wife was not the petitioner," the chairwoman said calmly. "You were." He looked at me then, truly looked. And I saw it all at once in his eyes. The collapse of the plan he had built, the panic rising beneath his skin, the realization that he never understood the man sitting across from him. My daughter, Claire, stood near the doorway. She must have arrived while the documents were being reviewed. When our eyes met, hers filled instantly, not with guilt or shame exactly, but with a deep, aching sorrow. The kind that comes from watching someone you love reveal who they really are. She stepped forward, voice trembling. "Dad, I didn't know." I nodded gently. "I believe you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She pressed a hand to her mouth and shook her head as she looked at Evan, her husband, now a stranger in a room full of truth. The board dismissed me shortly after that. Told me I had no further obligations, no evaluations, no follow-ups. They thanked me for my clarity, for my cooperation, for bringing truth forward. But the truth is, I didn't bring anything forward. The truth had been waiting. Quietly. Patiently. Like the lake outside my home. All I did was stop letting someone else speak over it. Walking out of that building felt like stepping into a warmer world. The sky had cleared. The air smelled of pine and sunlit pavement. Helen walked beside me, her steps slow to match mine, her presence strong and steady. "You did good," she said softly. "I just told the truth," I answered. She smiled. "Sometimes that's the bravest thing." She offered to drive me home, but I told her I wanted to sit in the park across from the lake for a while. She understood. She always has. So I sat on a wooden bench, my cane resting beside me, watching the water move with a rhythm older than any of us. And for the first time in weeks, the world felt like mine again. Later, I walked back to my cottage. The boards on the porch hummed under my feet. The door clicked softly as I locked it behind me. I made tea, sat on my favorite chair, watched the sun dip low across the water, painting everything in warm, amber light. The weight in my chest drifted away, replaced by something quieter. Something earned. He underestimated me. He underestimated age. He underestimated silence. Most of all, he underestimated the wrong old man. And sitting there on my porch, with the evening breeze brushing against my skin, I knew one thing for certain. My life, my quiet, steady, honest life, was still mine. And I intended to keep it that way. If this story touched you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop a single word in the comments. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.